Hey Cryptoverse, let's take a look at some charts for the latest Ripple article on Brave New Coin. So you can't talk about Ripple without starting to talk about the supply. Now initially they minted 100 billion back in 2015, and then in 2017 December they escrowed most of it. Well, not most of it, but 50% of it. And Ripple also has some. And the long and the short of all of this is they're constantly slow dripping the escrow and their own holdings onto the circulating market, which is a perpetual selling pressure. So there's really no reason to hold Ripple long term. Why would you? Most of the supply is continually being sold. This is in millions here. Is continually being sold on the open market. Now, if you know that and understand that and are informed, that's fine. Then you can say, at least I know what's going on. But it's the uninformed people that I think hurt the most, because they believe the memes, they believe the moonshot, 589, whatever, whatever stuff's going to happen. And it's like, well, you have to understand most of the supply is being slow dripped on top of you as you're buying. So if we look at the weekly active addresses, which is the line here, and the average transaction values, which is the fill, first thing that sticks out is the all-time high in average transaction value was when they moved all that Ripple into escrow. It hasn't exceeded that. Probably will never exceed that insane average. It's a massive transaction. They did all in one shot or multiple shots, whatever they did. But it's probably never going to exceed that. So just looking at where we've been since January 19th, it's just been a constant range. Nothing really important or that sticks out. No massive, ups or dips or troughs or whatever. Active address has perked up a little bit leading into May, June, July, and then they sort of petered out completely into October, going into new yearly lows, further yearly lows at the beginning of the year, and then all of a sudden there's some weirdness here that it's too early to tell if this is organic, if this is meaningful. Based on how it looks, probably not. Anytime I see stuff that goes up one week and down the next, I tend to think that's not organic, or that's somebody testing something or spam on the network. What you want to see is this slow rise or slow fall. Then you can say, okay, it's organically falling here. There's just less people, or it's organically rising. From July to January, there were just a ton more people. And looking at Google Trends, I look at Google Trends mainly because they tend to be a leading indicator on what's going on. Now, people are going to disagree with me that it's a lagging indicator, but I don't see it like that at all. So looking at most of the Google Trends for most crypto, everything's sort of peaked up at all-time highs. Everything peaks up around previous highs, whatever it is for the coin. In this case, the all-time high was around December, January 2018, whatever. But recently, it's picked up a little bit from zero, basically. So again, you won't really know anything until the next week. And automatically you can say, well, then it's lagging. But I think it is a predictor for future price action. So if we're seeing week over week of Google Trend rising without anything happening in price, there's typically something bullish brewing. Looking at some price charts, if we look at what I always look at, which are the Bitfinex long-short ratio at the top panel here, the volume profile of the visible range, these horizontal bars, price, and then the 50 and the 200 EMA, red being the 200, green being the 50, as well as RSI, which is an oscillator, relative strength index, that I really only use to find extremes and or bullish or bearish divergences. So we have price coming back to the 200. It's a bearish cross here. The 200 is above the 50. It's death crossed. This is kind of what most of the high cap alts look like that haven't had any recent price action that's been massively bullish. They're kind of just mean reverting here. Ripple's a little different from most things in that much of the volume historically has been like right above the current range. And you can see from like July to July, basically, it was in this range of like 25 cents to 45 cents. So it's just, there's a ton of volume resistance above us here. So if it can get above the 200, above the 30-cent mark, which at this point is a pretty big psychological level, then I'd be apt to say it's probably going to hit 50 cents, which is the next VPVR node, as well as psychological resistance zone. No bullish or bearish divergences here, no extremes in RSI, nothing like that. So there's plenty of room for up. I think it just needs some time. I don't think it's going to move by itself. I think it's going to take the entire market to move Ripple up. And there's a bit of an alt season going on, so it's certainly possible. Looking at long short ratio, it's like 93% long right now. So if this does dip down significantly, like if this visits lower lows beyond 16 cents, these longs are going to come down and then it's going to get pushed even further. Looking at the Ripple Liquid Index, which isn't really available anywhere except privately. Hopefully it will be available somewhere soon. But looking at this is price history way before 2018. So you can see this massive pennant that, like on some of these charts you can't see on Bitfinex, it was just listed in mid 2017, but it was already on Stamp and a few other places at that point. So you're seeing this consolidation, right? We break out, and then ever since this breakout, it's been nothing but a downward trend. You can represent that in any way you want. I prefer the pitchfork, which chooses sort of extreme points in price and then paints a channel based on that. So it says this is the rate of change that you should expect as long as it's inside this pitchfork. You should expect price to return to this yellow-green zone several times over and over and over as long as the trend is active, which it's done. It's snaking inside and out of this. It's touching over and over and over again. And another thing you should expect is these extremes should be support and resistance until they break. So the reason I'm adding, you can see the typical pitchfork is this length, okay? I'm adding a few rungs here to capture this, and it captures this perfectly. You can take those off and you can say, I just want a vanilla pitchfork, but it doesn't really capture the constraints of this trend. So again, after we're past 31, which is what I was talking about with the VPVR on the last chart, there's this massive zone here at 30. So once it's past that, then we can say, 50, pretty likely. It's also kind of the last local high. Another thing you'll notice just on this index, they added Coinbase volume since September. So that's why it looks like it's sort of picked up a little bit since then. Looking at the cloud, nothing too exciting. Again, it's below the cloud. It's indeterminate. It's neutral. It's very similar to here where it has a chance to eventually perk up above the cloud, but it hasn't yet. So it's just range city, USA, or wherever you are in the world until we're above or below the cloud again. So if it gets above the cloud, again, we can say probably going to hit 30. If it breaks 30, it's probably going to hit 50. If it goes back below the cloud, most definitely will revisit lower lows. And based on that long short ratio, it has a threat of making much lower lows past 16 cents. Looking at this XRP BTC chart, for some reason, I always just look at RSI first, just the way my eyes sort of like look at this small column at the bottom. I just check RSI, sanity check, no bearish divergences here, no bullish divergences here. So like if we got a lower low in price and a higher low in RSI, I'd say, oh, okay, there's a bullish divergence here. It doesn't really match anything else. We're below the 200, below the cloud. Things are sort of very indeterminate here, but we don't even have that. And we're also below this massive volume zone at like 3,000 sats, another psychological level. Now, if this can sort of Adam Eve or W, double bottom, VV or UU, whatever it is, past this 3,800 zone and this 4,100 zone, then we're talking, potential upside. Price will be over the cloud. There'll be a bullish golden cross at that point. This 41 sats is a massive resistance zone. 41,000 sats. 4,100 sats. 4,100 sats. Then you can say, okay, it might reach for the 7,000 sat zone. But as it stands now, there's no bullish anything here. Definitely going to be grindy. Possibly revisiting lows here. Really depends on the market. I don't think in a vacuum Ripple even looks good ever. Very rarely is Ripple look like a buy. More often than not, you're going to want to short the highs on Ripple just based on what we've seen since all-time high. It's been just a ranging mess for years now. So until that ranging mess ends, it's really hard to justify even buying knives on Ripple, for a long-term play.